man has a choice. I chose the impossible. I built a city where the artist would not fear the censor, where the great would not be constrained by the small, where the scientist would not be bound by petty morality. I chose to build Rapture.
Bioshock is one of the most influential games ever created. 10 years after its release, both fans and creators look back and take inspiration from its unique world and story. But what is it that makes Bioshock so special? What sets it apart and makes it still incredibly replayable to this day?
Would you kill the innocent? Would you sacrifice your humanity? We all make choices, but in the end, our choices make us.
Hello there, I'm Logan Moore, and over the next 5 episodes we're going to be taking a look at what it is that makes Bioshock one of gaming's landmark titles. Over the course of this series, we'll be taking a look at the gameplay, sound, music, story, setting, and the developers who created Bioshock. With Bioshock turning 10 years old this year, now is as good of a time as any to take a look back and understand how its release changed video game storytelling moving forward. To start, we're going to take a look at what is perhaps the most important element in all of Bioshock: the city of Rapture. While there are a variety of important characters within Bioshock, the most important character of all is the setting of Rapture. The entire narrative of Bioshock begins and ends with this city under the sea, and the battle that ensues for control of it. To understand Rapture, however, we must first look at why it was created. Why is there a city at the bottom of the ocean in the first place? Well, that question is answered very early in the game, as Rapture's founder, Andrew Ryan, immediately delivers a monologue introducing the player to Rapture and the ideals that created it.
I am Andrew Ryan, and I'm here to ask you a question. Is a man not entitled to the sweat of his brow? No, says the man in Washington, it belongs to the poor. No, says the man in the Vatican, it belongs to God. No, says the man in Moscow, it belongs to everyone. I rejected those answers. Instead, I chose something different. I chose the impossible. I chose Rapture. A city where the artist would not fear the censor, where the scientist would not be bound by petty morality, where the great would not be constrained by the small. And with the sweat of your brow, Rapture can become your city as well.
Such a large amount of narrative context is rarely given at one time when telling a story, but this speech by Ryan helps quickly establish the location and purpose of Rapture's existence. While it provides us with a good insight into who Andrew Ryan is as a character, which we'll discuss further in a future episode of Rediscovering Rapture, more importantly it tells us what it is that Rapture represents: a libertarian society where people are allowed to solely be dependent on themselves and their creative inhibitions. What we quickly find upon entering Rapture, however, is nothing like the city we see described in this opening video. This leads to perhaps the most interesting part of the entirety of Bioshock, exploring the ruins of what we are led to believe was once a great city. A utopia, if you will. As we see Rapture when playing, it's about as far away from what Ryan describes it as in the opening. Dead corpses litter the ground, bloodstains are splashed all across the wall, and drugged up junkies are waiting to kill you around every corner. Throughout Bioshock, we are given clues through use of environmental detail that teach us more about how Rapture fell into chaos, how it evolved into what it is that we see now. While we never directly get to see the city's plunge into horror, we're provided with an idea as to what Rapture was at its height, and what eventually led to its downfall.
Ugly! Ugly!
This is further emphasized in a variety of audio logs that you can find while playing through the game that contain characters talking about how Rapture was once the utopia that Andrew Ryan envisioned.
You will not believe me, but there was a time when this place was also beautiful.
Bioshock's creative director Ken Levine has stated that one of his main goals with creating Rapture is that he wanted it to feel real and lived in. Certain aspects of the world of Rapture remain intact despite the horrific downfall of the city. Things like the U-Invent stations and the Circus of Value stores help show aspects of Rapture's former economy and life.
Welcome to the Circus of Value!
Rapture also feels real because of the familiar nature of its layout and design. Rapture's Art Deco architecture was heavily inspired by the locations and buildings of New York City, such as the Rockefeller Center. Rapture also contains a vast number of advertisements for businesses within the city, many of which were inspired by real-world vintage ads. There are also a handful of mechanisms such as the bathyspheres, which were used for travel, and the plasmids, which, while being weaponized in the game, are promoted as everyday use benefits for the citizens of Rapture. Everything within Bioshock feels like it has an everyday purpose, even though the way our character makes use of them doesn't line up with its intended purpose. Bioshock's location is what I consider to be the game's biggest strength. There's such an attention to detail to ensure that everything within Rapture lends itself to both storytelling and environment building. Rapture is easily one of the most well-crafted environments ever seen in video games, let alone one of the most iconic. In the next episode of Rediscovering Rapture, we're going to take a look at some of the characters that plunged Rapture into turmoil. Some of these will include the city's founder, Andrew Ryan, and his adversary, Frank Fontaine, as well as our mysterious protagonist, simply known as Jack. We'll be examining how the motives and trajectories of these characters interact with one another throughout the course of Bioshock's story. Until then, I'll see you next time.